There is so much in today's reading that just these chapters, chapter 13, 14, and 15, it's like these chapters are screaming Jesus. And it is written on bold. His name is on bold in every chapter in this reading. And I want you to see it. In chapter 13 and 14, you can even see it. Think about how Abram will trust the Lord. He trusts the Lord so much. He just received that promise from the Lord, and now he realizes that even he is so trusting in the Lord that he lets Lot pick where they're going to live, recognizing that even if he gets the disadvantage out of that, is not going to somehow wreck God's plan here. And it's beautiful. You can see in Lot's capture when he gets captured and gets caught up in a place of sin and gets caught up in that. He needs somebody to rescue him. Abram comes and rescues him. Lot's rescue, if you will, is actually a prophetic picture of how you and I are rescued by Jesus. We're in that place of sin, and Jesus comes and rescues us. You can see that in here. But I want you to see something in chapter 14. If you consider this bit about Melchizedek and being this kind of mysterious figure who is first of all, he's the king of Salem, which is Jerusalem, and yet he's also a priest. And it's interesting that nowhere else in all of the history of Israel is any of their kings a priest, and none of their priests are kings. And so who is this guy? And he has so much respect, or he gets so much respect from Abram, that Abram pays him a tithe. That is only something that you would do to the Lord. And so this is fascinating. Who is Melchizedek? Well, we know based on Hebrews 7, it's actually pointing us to Jesus, who is the king. He's the king of all kings. He is our faithful and high priest. And this is a foreshadowing of Jesus, again, pointing us to Jesus. And then in chapter 15, you see something just incredibly beautiful. What you see in the beginning of chapter 15 in verse 1, it talks about God being Abram's reward. And God is essentially wooing or inviting Abram into this relationship. It's a relationship in which God will actually do all the heavy lifting, if you will. If you look at verse 12 to the end of the chapter in verse 21, there's this cutting ceremony. And a cutting ceremony in those days was done. They would take some animals, they would cut them in half, and then the two parties who were going to take part of a covenant would walk between those animals. And they would basically be saying, if either one of us breaks this covenant, let whatever happened to these animals happen to us. And so it's a really solemn promise. And in this story, God actually makes the covenant. Abram is sleeping, and God, he's represented by that blazing torch, he himself passes through basically saying, I'm swearing on my own name, by myself, that this covenant is unconditional. And so what is Abram's responsibility in that? If you look at verse 6 in chapter 15, his responsibility is to believe. That is not different than you and me. God calls us, he's done the heavy lifting. He calls us to this place of belief. And what's going to prove that belief? How we live that out from that day onward. And so you could ask some questions to the Lord today about this. Do I trust God to provide? Or questions along that line. You could also spend time asking God, in these chapters in Genesis, it seems like our eyes should just be focused on you, God. Is that how I live? Am I like Abram? Do I actually believe? Do I have my eyes fixed solely on you? Or is there something else in my life that keeps on creeping in that deters my belief in you? Spend time with the Lord this morning and just enjoy that relationship that he invites you to.